Good people, I created the video to take you through metamorphic facies. During the course of my academic studies, I just realized that most of the people, most of geologists, or most of people who study the rocks, they tend to find it difficult to understand the metamorphic facies. So remember, metamorphic rocks are the rocks that were formed due to extreme temperatures and pressures in a specific geologic setting. So meta is a change, and then morph is a form. So it's a Greek term meaning change in a form, but in a solid state. Should it be in a melt, we will be talking about igneous rocks. So without any further waste of time, I would like to take you through metamorphic facies. So as geologists, we have to understand that in any given metamorphic setting, there can be a variety of protolith types exposed to metamorphism. So while these rocks will be exposed to the same range of pressure and temperature conditions within that setting, we different settings in geology, we can be talking about the subduction setting, we can be talking about the orogenic setting, we can be talking about the case where in the intrusion the intrusion intrude or the magma intrude into the surrounding rocks. So that's why we're saying the different settings. So now the metamorphic rock that will result will depend on the protolith, which is the parent rock. So for instance, before we can talk much about these things, we have to understand what a term metamorphic facies is. Metamorphic facies, it's a geologic term which is nothing but a set of mineral assemblage in a metamorphic rocks formed under similar pressures and temperatures. So a metamorphic facies, it's a group of mineral assemblages. Then those mineral assemblages, they tend to be formed with the similar temperature and pressures. How is that the case? For instance, let's say we have a low grade, the intermediate, and the high grade metamorphic zones. Now you can tell that within each zone, low grade, intermediate, high grade, we have different rocks. In this case, we have slate, we have phyllite, we have schist, and then gneiss in every metamorphic zone. And within each zone, we have different minerals that are stable within that grade. For a low grade, we have a chloride, which is a stable index mineral in low grade. But when we having high grade, we have rocks such as a gneiss, and then most likely minerals that are stable within that range is sillimanite, little bit of staurolite, and garnet, of course, even biotite. Even a little bit of biotite could be stable in high grade metamorphism. So to help you understand this term, since I've discussed already that this is a geologic term that is used to describe a set of mineral assemblages in a metamorphic rocks formed under the similar temperatures and pressure. So I was telling you that if we have a metamorphic setting, within every metamorphic setting, within every setting, there will be the rocks that will be exposed to the extreme temperatures and pressures. Those rocks, it could be igneous, it could be metamorphic, it could be sedimentary. Those rocks, we call them protolith, parent rocks. Now, parent rock, it could be basalt, it could be a shale. So basalt and shale won't form the same metamorphic rocks, and also they will have different mineral assemblages. For instance, the diagram that is displayed here, the likely rocks are shales, slate, phyllite, schist, and gneiss. The likely parent rock of these rocks, these metamorphic rocks, it's a shale in this, or it's a shale or even mudstone. It's a shale or even mudstone. So, like I said, that the basalt and the shale won't form the same metamorphic rocks. If this case was rather a basalt, if it was basalt, obviously it would form rocks such as green schist, amphibolite, and granulite, respectively. So you can tell that different protolith, they form different metamorphic rocks, and those metamorphic rocks that are occurring within each grade or within each metamorphic zone, they would have different mineral assemblages. So geologists uses the term metamorphic facies as a convenient way to indicate the range of possible metamorphic rocks in a particular setting. As geologists, we can therefore talk about different tectonic settings, like I said, subductions, orogenic, etc. So rocks which contain certain minerals can be linked to its tectonic settings. What am I talking about? So within each tectonic setting, rocks would contain certain index minerals. Now, what are we talking about when we say index minerals? So since now you understand the metamorphic facies is a set of mineral assemblages in a metamorphic rocks that formed under the similar pressures and temperatures, now you'd agree with me that, okay, when we're talking about the index minerals, these are the minerals which serves as a good markers of specific range of metamorphic conditions. Why are they good markers? Because on the example that I already gave you, we have index mineral chloride, muscovite, and the biotite in the low grade. You can tell that the first mineral that it's likely to appear in a low grade, it's a green mineral, which is a chloride. The chloride and muscovite, even a little bit of biotite, they mark the low grade. So they are the index minerals, and then in this case, they serve as a good markers. They mark different grades. They are good markers of the metamorphic conditions. Which conditions? Low grade, which likely to refer to low temperatures and pressures, the intermediate, something in between, and the high grade, which is high temperatures and pressures. And then should the conditions be greater than the higher grade, we have a likelihood that we might not form a gneiss, but we can have a mixture of metamorphic and igneous rock, which in this case it's a gradational rock, which is called a migmatite. But we will talk about that. Now, we will still be talking about the index minerals, and we indicated that the index minerals are nothing but the good markers of the specific ranges of metamorphic conditions, and they are used. You have to know their advantages to the geologist per se. So they are used to map areas of high or lower metamorphic intensity called metamorphic zones. Remember, I took you through metamorphic phases. Now I'm talking about the metamorphic zone. What is a metamorphic zone? A metamorphic zone is a region bounded by the first appearance of an index mineral. Now the low grade, obviously, it marks the first appearance of the mineral chloride. So, which is why we're saying that the metamorphic zone is a region bounded by the first appearance of an index mineral. In this case, in this zone, the first mineral appearance will be chloride. That is to say, when as geologists, when we are mapping, or it could be everyone who's moving across the area of interest. Let's say, for instance, that area it is covered by mainly metamorphic rocks. So imagine walking across the area of your own interest where a lot of metamorphic rocks are exposed. As you walk, you find a shale. What does it tell you? Okay, we will discuss about that in just a few minutes. I was telling you about the index mineral that it serves as a good markers of a specific ranges of metamorphic conditions. And I further said they are used to map the areas of high or low metamorphic intensity. They used to map the areas of low grade or the high grade. Now, what are these areas of the metamorphic intensities? These areas are called metamorphic zones. These are the zones. Now, a metamorphic zone is a region. You can tell these plates, it's a region. It's a region bounded by the first mineral appearance, like I said. Now, mineral appearance, like for instance, a chloride, I told you that when you are in a low grade metamorphism, the likely first mineral to appear, it will be a green mineral chloride. And usually the low grade metamorphic rocks or metamorphic minerals, they are hydras because the temperatures are still low, but progressively with increased temperature and pressures, the hydrous mineral tend to be non-hydrous minerals. So before I would tell you more about the different protoliths that would tend to give you different rocks within each grade, then those rocks they are containing the index minerals. Now, before that, I want to take you through the limits of metamorphism so that you you understand the limit of metamorphism. Metamorphism. What are the limits of metamorphism? You know, as geologists, we tend to divide the rate of metamorphism or the conditions of metamorphism. That is to say, let's say we know for a fact that we in sedimentology, during the transportation, the weathering, the transportation, the deposition, the sediments, they tend to experience what we call, or to undergo, the diagenesis process. And then that diagenesis process, it would lead to the rocks to be lithified into a sedimentary rock. So temperatures that are at least 100 to 150 degrees Celsius, sorry about that, that are at least 100 to 150 degrees Celsius, we call them, these conditions we call the lower limit, which is bounded by weathering and diagenesis. So the lower limit is bounded by weathering and diagenesis. Why is that the case? Because in these conditions, metamorphism begins in this range. Metamorphism begins for the more unstable types of parent rocks or protoliths. Should the conditions, or should the rocks form below 100 degrees to this 150 range, we would be talking about sedimentary rocks, because below 100 and 150 range, we're talking about diagenesis. So we will be talking about the sedimentary rocks. So metamorphism, the lower limit of metamorphism, it starts in the range 100 to 150. That's where the change in a form of rocks get to come into picture. Now, the upper limit is bounded by melting. Okay, what about the upper limit? You have to understand the conditions. The conditions of the upper limit, it could be greater than 700 degrees Celsius, or 700 to 1000. It depends. But that is the conditions of the upper limit. So over the melting range, the solid and the liquids coexist. We say that when the rocks get to experience the extreme or the intense temperatures and pressures, they can melt. Obviously, we're talking about the partial melting, wherein the part of the rock just melt. Now, because now the melt and the solids, they now coexist together, we can form a rock such as migmatite. Now, a migmatite is a mixture. It's a mixture of solid and liquid. That is to say, when remember we said metamorphism, it should be in a solid state. So should the melting okay, we can talk about something in between. We would say maybe igneous and little bit of igneous and little bit of metamorphism, and then that rock, it's a mixture of rocks, and it's a gradation. It's a gradational, that is to say, it was formed with intense temperatures and pressures progressively. They are formed by the progressed metamorphism. That was the limit of metamorphism. I was telling you that you have to understand the different protoliths. You have to understand the different protoliths. Now, remember, I was telling you that we have the metamorphic zones, which are the regions that are bounded by the first appearance of the mineral. And then we talked of metamorphic facies, we talked of the index minerals. So I was telling you that imagine walking across the area where a lot of metamorphic rocks are exposed. As you walk, you find a rock shale. It's a sedimentary rock. It's a protolith. It's a parent rock. As you go further, you start to see textures of what? The rocks, such as slates, and phyllite. And walking further, you can see schist and gneiss respectively. What these rocks tells you as a geologist. Now, this simply tells you that we are reaching different grades of metamorphism. Because even the mineralogical composition was changing from what? From slate to gneiss. So the chloride, which is a low-grade green index mineral, it tells us that the metamorphism has begun exactly at this point. The point which marks what? The low grade. So when you see the green mineral chloride, it tells you that the metamorphism was beginning. So as we keep walking, we can start seeing the phyllite, the schist, and the gneiss, and even biotides. If we were to talk about if we were to talk about different protolith, but in this instance, we're still talking shale, which is a parent rock. So shale has this format of forming slate, phyllite, schist, and a gneiss. And then you can see that within a low-grade metamorphism, you have a chloride, which it's a fundamental mineral in low grade, and even because it covers this entire area. Even the muscovite, can see that the muscovite it covers the intermediate into the low grade. So even the muscovite is part and parcel of the low grade, and little bit of, we can say 50 or 60% of little bit percent of biotite. So these are the minerals in the low grade. But when we start to reach the intermediate grade, we start seeing the quartz and feldspars. We start to see the garnet, the staurolite, and even kyanite. And when we approaching the gneiss, we start seeing the mineral sillimanite, which is the index mineral that is forming in the intense pressures and temperatures. Now, you shouldn't confuse the green schist facies and the green schist as a rock. Now, remember what we said a facie is. A green schist is a rock, the amphibolite is a rock, and even the granulite is a rock. But the facies, the amphibolite, the granulite, the green schist, the facies, these are the type of the facies. Okay, Now, if we were to change the parent rock, then now in this case we take a Mafic igneous rock. We can take a gabbro, we can take a basalt, we can take these rocks because they are Mafic rocks. Now, the Mafic rocks, when they undergo metamorphism, they would form the rocks such as green schist, amphibolite, and the granulite, respectively. And now you can see that within each grade, let's start with the low grade, you start to see the chloride, which is still the first mineral appearance in the low grade. And the epidote, even the little bit of the amphibole. As we go to amphibolite, you can see that the dominant mineral is the amphibolite. The dominant mineral is the amphibole. The green schist, the dominant mineral is a chloride because it's a green mineral. The granulite, we know we're increasing the temperature, and we know in the Barrovian reaction series, from old people are boring, old people are boring. Olivine pyroxene, old people are boring. Amphibole and biotite, these are the discontinuous minerals. So pyroxene is one of the mineral that is formed, that is a mafic mineral formed in the higher temperatures. So you can tell that now when we're having a granulite fishes, it would have more of this pyroxene. And even amphibole, it would overlap. It will overlap from what? Amphibolite to granulite. Why is that the case? Because we know that if we have a pyroxene, the pyroxene would form an amphibole, and then which is why an amphibole can be part of the granulite fishes. Now you can tell that within each metamorphic grade we have different minerals respectively depending on the parent rock. Now in this case the parent rock was the Mafic igneous rocks. It could be gabbro or basalt. Then we can form green schist, amphibolite, and granulite respectively with the index minerals which they mark the zones. Or you can talk of the term isograd. ISO, for a fact, ISO means the same. And grade, you would guess, grade. Grade means grade. So this isograde, it marks the same or the equal grades. So what does the isograde means? The isograde means nothing but the line that separates each metamorphic zone. If I were to draw this, you can say this it's an isograde because it marks, or it's a line that separate each metamorphic zones. Like in this case, if we were to talk about that point, within or on that line, isograde, it separate low grade and intermediate. And if we were to talk about this, obviously the isograde will be the line separating the intermediate grade to high grade metamorphism. I hope you did understood that. Should you guys require me to do another video, I would do on the textures, how the slate, how the phyllite, the schist, and the gneiss tend to be. Like when we're having a gneiss, we know it will have bands, it will have gneissic bands. Schist, it will have the schistosity. And then Maphyllite, it will have sheen characters. Slate, it will have slaty cleavage and stuff. So these are the things, some of the things that should be discussed in greater detail. Should you require me to do another video, you guys will tell me, then I will do most or the video about these textures. Before we finish off the session, we know for a fact that we talked of metamorphic facies, and we all did understood that. We all understood the Barrovian metamorphism, which are separated in three facies, which is low grade, middle grade, and high grade. And we know for a fact, we've discussed that those facies, when we apply them geologically, we tend to have low grade to be equal to the green schist, and then the middle grade to be amphibolite facies, and the higher grade to be granulite fascia. So the low grade is the green schist, and the middle grade is the amphibolite, and the high grade the granulite. This is the Barrovian metamorphism. But to talk more about what's happening in this diagram, we know for a fact we've discussed the limit, the conditions of the lower limit, and we said, okay, within the range 100 to 150, should the temperature or the conditions be less than 100, we would be talking the region of diagenesis. Everything below that, we're talking about the region of diagenesis. But above that temperature, from 150 above, we start to see the first metamorphic facie, which is a zeolite. And I've discussed already that the low grade metamorphic facies, they would have the water within their structure. The minerals will have water within their structure. So you'd understand that zeolite, they are characterized by the water content within their structure. So within or along that direction, that is to say from zeolite, green schist, amphibolite, up until we reach granulite. Let me draw it in a good manner. From zeolite to granulite. This is a Barrovian type of a Barrovian metamorphism, wherein I told you already that you would have green schist facies, amphibolite facies, and granulite facies. And in some other instance, you can have prehnite, pampilite, between zeolite facies and green schist facies. But when we start to talk about the hornfels, it's a contact metamorphism. It's a contact metamorphism wherein intrusion, it provides heat and water to the surrounding rocks. Then that water that will be percolating along the fractures or within the fractures, they would contribute to what we call a hydrothermal metamorphism. But the heat, it will bake some, let's say this was an intrusion, the heat it would bake the rocks here. It will bake the rocks here. And obviously these rocks, if they were sedimentary rocks, like maybe for instance, you find that these were rocks such as, sorry about that there were every rock here, maybe let's say the rocks here. I will draw it nicely so that you can understand. Let's say the rocks around this, we were to talk about limestone. We know the metamorphism of a limestone, it would give you as a marble, which is a metamorphic rock. So the heat, its effect in a metamorphic petrology is to alter or metamorphose the protoliths or the surrounding rocks. But the water, as it gets out of it gets out of the intrusion, it will percolate along, or it will go through the fractures of the surrounding rocks, and obviously it will concentrate, or it will bring along its way up, it will be concentrating the minerals that are found within the surrounding rocks, concentrate them at the top, and in this case we likely to form what we call ore deposits. But if again you'd like us to talk about different types of metamorphism in a detailed fashion, we would definitely do that. I was just giving you a brief of what a contact metamorphism is all about, and in this case it forms hornfels fascies, and then type of rock within the hornfels fascia. It could be a hornfels, which is a fine-grained rock, which is non-foliated. There is a reason why it's non-foliated, because it is not a region. It hasn't experienced the pressure, the directed pressure. Should it have been experienced the directed pressure, we would be talking about foliation. Again, this, if you'd like us to talk about like I said, the slate, the phyllite and the schist, then the bending, the gneissic bend, we can have a video about that because it requires the detailed fashion. So, but to give you a brief, the hornfels, it will a hornfels, it's a fine-grained rock, metamorphic rock, which is non-foliated. But when we start to talk about this region, blue schist and eclogite fascies, these are the subduction zone metamorphism. Blue schist, it tends to be formed when, let's say, this plate was going that direction, was subducting, and then this is a continental crust. Obviously everything here that is forming folding, it's type of a blue schist. It's a blue schist or chlorophane. A rock would be chlorophane, blue schist. Blue schist. What's happening to my pen? I don't know. Blue schist. Now, blue schist is characterized by high pressures. It's characterized by high pressures and low temperatures. Why is that the case? Because the directed pressure, it forces the part of the continent, or the because remember this, they occur when continents, when continents or when two plates are converging, then that would cause, or they would, it would cause the pressure to be high and then the temperature to be low. But as soon as the plate is getting deeper into the mantle, it will form what we call an egglogite facies. Egglogite is formed somewhere here where melting starts. In the deeper part, this is where we have high temperature and you can have low pressure. Then we start to have an egglogite. Should you require us to talk about different types of metamorphic rocks, and not just the rocks per se, but different types of metamorphism and their geologic setting, you would tell me and then we would do the video on that. So like I was saying that we have a blue schist and the egglogite, and you've seen how those things are formed and their geologic setting. In this case, it should be the subduction. And then I told you about the green schist amphibolite and the granulite. That's the type of the Barrovian metamorphism. They are regional. And then the continental ones, they could be the hornfels facies, forming the rocks such as the hornfels. Should we start to experience the conditions, now we start to have a melt. This is where we start to have the rock, a migmatite, which is a mixture of or it's a rock wherein the liquid and the solid coexist together, and it's a gradation, or it's a gradational. I think this could be the end of our session. Thank you.